All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us tonight. And I want to welcome you to another webinar from Wildlife for You titled Bears of the World. And what we're going to be doing, we're going to be exploring the family of Ursidae. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But as most of you know, I'm Daryl Radijak. I'm a wildlife biologist. I'm also a large carnivore specialist, and I will explain that here more in a bit. So to get underway here, when we jump into this webinar, the one thing I always like to do is I always like telling people a little bit about my experience, or if it's another instructor, we always go into our experience and our background just so people have faith in the information that we're providing here at Wildlife for You, and to let you know that we're fairly skilled in our trade. So to give you a little bit of background about myself, everyone knows I'm a lifelong lover of wildlife. I do have a passion for bears, and that grew out of many of the previous jobs that I held. I do want you to know that I do have a degree in wildlife management. Got that degree in 1992 from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. It's the longest college name in the world. If you've never heard of it before, it's on the Syracuse University campus. And so did get my degree in wildlife management in 1992. One of the first jobs I took after getting my degree was working for a place called the Appalachian Bear Center. Many of you now know it as the Appalachian Bear Rescue. I worked there from 1997 all the way to 2000, end of 2000. And that was truly where my passion for working with large carnivores, especially with bears, grew. Not just learning more about them, but really interacting and engaging the people. From that point, my career kind of took off. I secured a position with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. That is the state wildlife agency for New York. That's the state wildlife agency for Tennessee. And the cool thing is, after I took that initial position, within 2 years, I was promoted to the statewide big game program coordinator. So in essence, I was the black bear coordinator for the state of Tennessee. And that was from 2004 all the way to 2011. So instead of caring for individual animals like I was at the Bear Center, now I was managing bear populations throughout the entire state. Now, for some reason or another, the director of the agency, Ed Carter, he saw something in me and he promoted me to chief of wildlife in 2011. So instead of just being over the big game programs like deer and bear and elk, I was then over all wildlife for the state of Tennessee. And I did that from 2011 to 2015. 2015, I took a leap, moved to the federal side of things and headed out west. I always wanted to live and work out west. And that's where I am today. But just so you know, I am a career wildlife biologist, have over 20 years experience working with bears and lots of other animals. So hopefully you have some faith that what I'm going to teach you tonight is actually pretty good stuff. So to get started here, we're going to be talking about bears of the world, and we're going to focus on this family Ursidae. And I am going to get nerdy on you for a second. I don't care because it's a good nerdiness, it's wildlife-related nerdiness. And so what we're going to do, we're going to get a little technical. I'm going to bring up these. Can anyone guess what those letters stand for? You don't have to type it out, but when I was back in, I don't know if it's grade school or high school, you had to remember this in your science class. And I always had to come up with intricate ways to remember things. There's an acronym. Some people use a weird acronym. The one that I always made up for myself was King Phil came over from Genesee Street, but that's not what it stands for. It actually stands for kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Everyone knows this. Everyone has seen this. This is called the Linnaean classification. It's pretty much how we determine which animals are related and which animals are their own species. And so we're going to talk about this because I want you to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about this family Ursidae. So obviously bears belong in the kingdom Animalia. We're talking about animals here. Obviously there's other classifications such as plants or fungi or funguses. Well, no, it's not funguses, it's fungi. But needless to say, bears fall in the kingdom Animalia. Their phylum is Chordata. What that means is All the animals in this phylum have a backbone. So things like slugs and insects, they're not in this phylum. But all the other animals with a backbone belong in here. Class is pretty easy. Most people recognize this. You have mammals, you have birds, you have reptiles, you have amphibians. That is what differentiates classes. And then last but not least, here we have the order, which is Carnivora. It means these animals that we're talking about in this order are all carnivores. So I'll get some pictures up here again. So if you break it down, this is kind of what we're looking at. So we already did the kingdom, phylum, class, order. And so within that order of Carnivora, there's a whole bunch of different families of animals. So this Feliformia, that's pretty much all the cats. You have Canidae, or all the canids, or dogs. Down here, you have Pinnipedia, which are like sea lions and seals, some of those marine mammals. You also have some of the mustelids, like weasels and skunks and things like that. But then right smack dab in the middle, you have Ursidae. Now the one right above Ursidae, if you can see that, it has a little symbol in front of it, that Hemicyonidae. That is an extinct species that is found in the fossil record. It is very similar to bears, but they are no longer with us on this planet. So bears belong to the family Ursidae. Now to get things started here, I'm going to ask a question. Who here knows how many species, living species of bears are there in the world right now? Very, very good. You guys are awesome. So when you're looking at how many species, what we end up with, there's 8 different species. And I'm not going to keep this up long because we're gonna dive into this and go into each of those 8 different species. But those 8 bears make up the family Ursidae. And that's what we're going to spend hopefully about 45 minutes talking about. And I'll spend all night long talking about it if you want to. But you'll see here I covered up the blue line because I don't want to give it away, because what I'm here to do is to help you learn and to have fun. So what we're going to do, I'm going to quiz you guys to start with. Now, don't be upset if you don't know any of these. A lot of these you may not have heard or seen, but if you want to join along, by all means get your typing fingers ready to type in some answers here. I might do the first ones a couple relatively quick, but by all means type away if you know the answer. So first bear we're throwing up there. We're going to start out really easy, guys. All right, polar bear. Very good. I should award points who could type the fastest. All right, there's the next species. All right, black bears. You guys will know this one. It depends. I want to see. All right, yeah, that's a brown bear. Okay, now things might slow down a little bit. So, what do you think this is? This is another species of bear. Nope, not sun, not sloth. Kelly got it right. That is a spectacled bear. And we're going to go in why that's a spectacled bear. All right, how about this guy here? Anyone know what that is? Not a moon. It is a moon, not a sloth. It's an Asiatic black bear, but it's also known as a moon bear. We'll go into that. All right, anyone know what that is? Kelly, you know your bears. Kelly's knocking them out. That is a sun bear. Very, very good. Then one of my favorites. Yes, that is a sloth bear. The big, furry, fuzzy guys are the sloth bears. And then what's the last bear we're missing? Nope, it's not the koala bear. Koala bears are not bears, so get that off your radar. The last bear we're missing, some people said it's the panda bear, giant panda. So these are going to be the bears that we're gonna focus on tonight and talk in greater detail, and hopefully answer whatever questions you may have. That's all right, Shirley. You don't have to type too much. We'll do a quiz later, because what I want to do is teach you about each one of these and how to recognize, and then we're gonna do a quiz towards the end. See how much you learned. So Where I'm going to start, I'm not going to spend too much time. In fact, I'm going to tell you about a little deal that I'm going to offer. I always send everyone a recording of the session we just took. We're gonna talk about all the different bears, the 8 different bear species. I'm kind of going to move fast through the bear species of North America because we did have a separate webinar called The 3 Bears. And when I send the recording out after tonight's class, I'm going to include tonight's recording as well as a copy of the 3 Bears recording, which if you ever want to learn more detail about the North American bears, you can follow that whole thing. We'll get in a lot more detail there. But we're going to start with North America. And so first bear I'm going to talk about is the polar bear. It's Ursus maritimus. Most people know what a polar bear looks like, but we're going to go into a little bit of details about each and every one. We'll discuss pretty much the same details on each of the bear species. Now, I did say this bear is found in North America. It is found in North America, but it has a much further range than just North America. Literally, it's found throughout the Arctic. So if you look at a map, kind of difficult to see, but towards the top of the globe, in those really high latitudes like the North Pole, we don't have bears in the southern hemisphere, but in the northern hemisphere towards the North Pole, it literally wraps around. So you have polar bears that are in North America, Alaska, Canada, and then a whole bunch of the Soviet Union. Lots of polar bears up there. And so obviously everyone knows that these polar bears are these far northern species. So appearance-wise, they're pretty special. I love talking about the way the polar bears look, because everyone sees that picture and right away they know that a polar bear is white. But believe it or not, especially for the folks that haven't been in on any of my other Arctic talks, a polar bear does not have white fur. It has translucent fur. It's literally transparent. And it's a neat adaptation because beneath all that fur, it has black skin. And everyone knows that when you go outside in the summertime, you wear white to stay cool because the white will reflect the sunlight. Black shirts in the summertime absorb the sunlight and you get hot. So a polar bear living in the North Pole is trying to stay warm. So it has this black skin with this translucent or see-through fur. It doesn't look like it to us, but the sun's rays could go right through and heat up that bear's body. I think that's one of the most amazing things about polar bears. Now, I will tell you, they are the largest of all bear species. They are immense. They can get up to 1,800 pounds. In fact, there was a record of one that was over 2,000 pounds. They are by far, not by far, they are the biggest of the 8 bear species that we have today. Now, diet, this is another interesting thing regarding polar bears. They are the only true carnivores. Almost their entire diet is going to be meat material. They focus primarily on seals, sea lions, and other fish species that they can catch. But for the most part, they're eating some other type of animal. And it makes a whole lot of sense because there's not a lot of plant life up there towards the North Pole. Now, when it comes to the habitat, it lists here marine and shorelines. They will come on shore. Obviously, you'll find polar bears on land in many places throughout Canada, the Soviet Union, and Alaska. But they spend quite a bit of time on the ice pack. And so that layer of ice, oftentimes when they're hunting, they're looking for those breathing holes from the seals, and they'll lay in wait for a seal to pop up, and that's how they secure their next meal. But for the most part, they're out on the water. It might be hard frozen water, but they're out on that water for a good portion of their life. Now, population, this is funny. We have population estimates for a number of bears, but there's a lot that we don't know. It's very, very difficult to come up with a population estimate for polar bears. Now, the one thing I will tell you is we do know with some of the issues with climate change that the ice pack is melting at a faster than usual rate, and that could put some of the bears in jeopardy. So they are listed as vulnerable. Now, when I show this listing of what their population's like, where this is coming from, it's called the IUCN. It's the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. and they document, it's like tens of thousands of species. It's an international organization that just tells you how secure that species is. And so we use that list all the time in the world of wildlife biology to see how well animals are doing throughout the world. And so polar bears, because of that unknown population and some of the impacts that are occurring with the sea ice, their status right now is listed as vulnerable. So, and well, I'm not even going to call questions yet. Let me get through the North American bears. So the next bear species we have is the brown bear. It's Ursus arctos. Now again, many of you have seen some of my other presentations, and I'll show a picture of that. Does anyone know what kind of bear that is? This is where you could type, actually. No, Jeannie, that's not a grizzly. Kodiak brown, very good, Donna. That bear is huge. Also known as an Alaskan brown bear or Kodiak bear. This bear is a grizzly. Now this grizzly, these are the ones that you tend to see around Yellowstone on the interior portions of the country. And so those bears, literally all three of those bears look different, but guess what? All three of those bears are Ursus arctos. They're all brown bears. And this is one of my pet peeves when it comes to splitting hairs, because oftentimes scientists will talk about subspecies or varieties. But if you look, all three of these pictures here are brown bears, all the same genus and species. Now that one at the top, that subspecies is Middendorfi. It gets huge. Those brown bears in Alaska, you have to understand they're feeding on this tremendous resource of salmon that come in each and every year, and they gorge themselves. And those bears get huge. They could get up to 1,200, 1,400 pounds. Now those bears on the interior, like towards Yellowstone, that are way away from the coast, they're primarily feeding on berries and things that typically a black bear feeds on. And so they don't get as big. And so they're nicknamed grizzly bear. That just means it's a brown bear subspecies horribilis, which is the coolest name of all. So all of those are all brown bears. It's all one species of bear that we have in North America. So where do brown bears range? Again, they're found in North America, but these bears literally dominate the northern hemisphere. They're one of the most widespread bears in the entire world. In fact, they are the most widespread bear in the world. If you look, and it's not the clearest map in the world, but you can see that dark coloration. In North America, they pretty much dominate that northwestern portion of the continent, Alaska, and then the western half of Canada. Now, it doesn't show the Yellowstone population, but that's all right. But look at Russia. Look at that whole northern half of Europe and Asia. And even down further in Asia, in many of those places, we have brown bears. And so lots of people don't realize that the brown bear is one of the widest spread, most populated bears in the world. And so what do they look like? Most people know what brown bears look like. For the most part, they're mostly brown. Now, I will tell you, they do have some colorations. They have some of the blondish coloration. They can also appear grayish or even silver at some time. But for the most part, most of the time you see them, they're going to be mostly brown, light colored brown. Now the size, they can be immense as well. Those coastal bears, those Alaskan bears or Kodiak bears, they can get up to 1,400 pounds. Huge, huge bears. Typically, when they're on the interior, those grizzlies like around Yellowstone, you're looking at a bear that may weigh 600 pounds, could get up to 800 pounds. They're usually a lot smaller, again, that's mostly due to their diet. But brown bears can get huge. If they're in an area that's lush with food resources, you're looking at 1,200, 1,400, maybe even a larger bear than that. So that they can get pretty immense. Jeannie asked a question about interbreeding. Yeah, absolutely. That's literally the definition between genus and species, is they can breed and produce viable offspring. So you take a a Kodiak bear or Alaskan brown bear and you present it to a grizzly in Yellowstone, and they'll mate like there's no tomorrow. Diet. Everyone knows that bears are pretty much omnivorous. We also call them opportunistic. They eat whatever they could find. And you have to think about this. What is easier to catch? A blueberry or an elk calf? For the most part, plants are easier to eat because they don't run away from you. And so you're going to see a lot of omnivorous bears. Just know that most of their diet does consist of plant material when it's omnivorous, because it's much easier for them to find and to catch. Now, once again, those Alaskan brown bears have that crazy fish supply of the salmon coming upstream. Those are pretty easy for them to grab as well. So that's why they eat a lot of that type of food. Now, habitat, it's awesome. It's pretty variable. They can adapt to literally all types of habitats. You think of them as this high mountain range type of bear, but historically they would be throughout the Great Plains. So they could live high elevation, low elevation, everything in between, from forest to desert to wetlands. Some of the brown bears in Turkey and Iran, you wouldn't think that they're in the Middle East, but they are. So they can survive literally all sorts of different habitats and do quite well, actually. Now, population-wise, well over 100,000. You don't have tremendously large populations of brown bears because they're an apex predator. And as an apex predator, you need room to roam. You don't have like 10 bears per square mile. You have like 1 bear per 10 square miles. And so you're not going to get huge populations of brown bears. Now, the status, again, once again from this IUCN, they are listed as least concern. That means they're not on our radar as being in trouble. Literally, their population is stable worldwide. That's a really, really good thing. In fact, if you look in North America, you have grizzly bear populations that are growing, like the greater Yellowstone area. And so, as much as we hear about brown bears in the news, the population worldwide is doing very, very well. So, that's going to take us to our last bear of North America. I'm not going to spend much time here. Most people are familiar with black bears, which is Ursus americanus. Range, North America. The one thing I like showing here, they're not found in the Eastern Hemisphere, pretty much North America alone. And the map on the left shows the historic range of black bears. The map on the right shows their current range. And you can see there's a lot of gaps in there now. Man, thinking that we're the dominant species, came in North America and literally wiped them out from many, many places throughout the continent. The good thing is these bears are reclaiming their territory. Over the last 100 years, we've learned to live with wildlife and put lots of regulations on it. And so you see a lot of bears reclaiming their territory. I was speaking to Donna beforehand today and just talking about how quickly the bear population is growing in her area. And so the good thing is black bear populations are doing fantastic. Now, appearance, the color is variable. You think a black bear is black, but you've seen these pictures before. All of these pictures are black bears. This is what makes black bears the most beautiful bear we have. They can be blonde, they can be brown, they can be red or cinnamon, they can be black, they can be white, they can be bluish gray. So it's amazing that the color variations for black bears. All the same species, just different colors. Now, as far as size, this is where we're dropping down. The polar bear and the brown bear are our biggest bears. Now we're getting into those medium-sized bears. So black bear will range generally 200 to 600 pounds. You can get larger ones, not too often. Diet, once again, they're omnivorous. They're going to be eating whatever they find in front of them. For the most part, it's going to be vegetable matter. Habitat, just like the brown bear, highly variable. They can live in the swamps. They can live in the highest peaks of the mountains and everything in between. Now, population-wise, they're still one of those apex predators, but not as much as a brown bear. So population, just North America, 600 to 800,000. They're doing fantastic. So because of that, once again, their population is listed as least concern. In fact, the good thing with black bears, because of what I was telling you before, their populations are increasing at a fairly substantial rate. So those are the 3 bears of North America. Any quick questions? Wait until we get these, and I'll only take a couple, because I have a tendency to talk and talk and talk. Okay, Jeannie asked a question. Didn't ABR have a different type of black bear from Louisiana? It is not it's still a black bear. Remember the subspecies, like with a brown bear, you have those Kodiak and you have those grizzly. They're all the same species, but they're different subspecies. What a Louisiana black bear is, whenever we're talking subspecies, usually it signifies the geographic range. And so Louisiana black bear is a black bear from Louisiana. It's the subspecies, and I don't know what the subspecies name is, but it just tells you what geographic range it's from. I personally cannot stand the subspeciation because it just leads to confusion within the public. So that bear from Louisiana was still a black bear. It was just a Louisiana black bear, and they've listed those as endangered. And so that's why it was, I think they've come off the endangered list, but they're all black bears, all the same species. So, all right, I am going to, how did bears get classed as carnivores when most of them are really omnivores? Because that's a good question. They're definitely mostly omnivores, but because they do eat the meat, I think they're just lumping them in with that carnivore class. Now, whenever we're talking about carnivores, it's pretty much grouped into 2 things. You have these carnivores which are omnivores, like the bears, but then there's a whole bunch of carnivores that are true carnivores, like the cats and most of the like wolves. Those are primarily true carnivores. They're killing something in order to survive. Bears are not like that, but it's just one of the lumping. You can argue the Linnaean speciation thing all the time on what goes where and this goes where. And believe it or not, it's constantly changing. And so what I teach you today might not hold true next year. As science evolves, which everything evolves like that, we're learning more and more things. But right now, carnivores are just any animal that can eat meat. Okay. So moving on, we're going to jump off North America and we're going to head to South America. And believe it or not, there's only one bear species in South America, and that's this guy. It's the spectacled bear. And this is going to be really easy to remember from this point forward. Scientific name is that Tremarctos ornata. I'm not going to quiz you on any of these genus and species, but I put it up there in case you're interested. But the name in and of itself tells you exactly what it looks like. That spectacled bear, think of someone wearing spectacles or glasses. I also see it as kind of like a reverse raccoon with the mask around its eyes. But this also goes by a couple other names. You have the Andean bear. It also goes by the short-faced bear. Now, I don't have a really good side profile, but if you do see a spectacled bear from the side, its snout is much shorter than that of like a black bear or brown bear. The bears that you're used to have relatively long muzzles. These spectacled bears usually have a much shorter muzzle. So sometimes they're called short-faced bears. Now, the range, once again, this is the only bear found in South America, and it's found mostly in the Andes. Now, when I show you this map is kind of misleading because it shows you the countries in which they're found. That is not the extent of their range. If you think of the Andes, it is a really thin mountain chain that runs along that western half or western coast of South America. And most of these spectacled bears are up in those mountains in the Andes. That's why it's called the Andean bear. And so that geographic range is a little bit more than what it truly is in real life. Now, appearance. Once again, this is really easy. Color is mostly black, but they have this really distinct yellowish markings on the face. So anytime you see that circling of the eyes, on both eyes. Not completely. Sometimes it's mottled here and there, but whenever you have that yellow mask type of look, in almost every situation you're dealing with this spectacled bear. And so that's a really easy way to remember it. Now size, we're getting on the small size. This is one of the smaller bears. There's a couple of fairly small bears. Now if you remember where I showed you its range was, you're looking fairly close to the equator. It's pretty warm in lots of those places, especially in South America. And so I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but there's this concept called Bergmann's rule, which means the further north you go, or the colder it gets, the larger the body you have. And the closer you get to the equator, usually the smaller the body and the longer the legs. And so these bears have some of the smallest bodies of all the bear species. And so you're looking at full-grown bears between, usually the females are always smaller, but the females will be 80 to 150 pounds. You might get a male that gets up to about 300 pounds, but generally much smaller than the black bear. Now diet, again, omnivorous. They're going to be eating the native fruits and vegetables that are in South America, and I can give you some of those if you want. The habitat, think of them most bears are going to be very similar. They prefer those forested areas, but these spectacled bears, it could be similar to North America where the people are in the lowlands, because that's generally is where we put our cities and our towns. And so it leaves the bears the upper elevations. In South America, that is where a lot of these bears reside today, is those higher elevations in the Andes. Now, population-wise, you can see much different. North America, we have all these protections on bears, and we have populations in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Down there, in many of these third world countries, you don't have all the protections that we have here in North America. And so the population of spectacled bears is relatively small. That's in the entire world. So it's probably somewhere less than 10,000 bears. Because of that, they're listed by that IUCN as vulnerable. This species is one that they're keeping an eye on. So that takes care, believe it or not, of all the bears in South America. So let's jump now to Asia. We've done 4 bears so far, the 3 in North America, 1 in South America. The remaining 4 bears are all found in Asia. There's a couple in Europe, but for the most part, they're found in Asia. So let's start with this guy. This is the Asian black bear, Ursus tibetanus. This is the closest relative we have to the North American black bear. In fact, you see the exact same genus. So Ursus, this is a very close cousin to what we have here with the North American black bear. Now these go by a couple of different names. You'll hear them called Himalayan bear. You'll also hear them called moon bear, and I'll explain why in a second. You will also hear them called white-chested bear. And so that moon bear and that white-chested bear go hand in hand due to the coloration on their chest, or the markings that they have on their chest. Now, to give you an idea where these are found, they're fairly widespread. They're found in southeastern Asia. And if you look at the map, it's a pretty large area. If you equate that to North America, it's comparable in size. Now, just because it ranges all throughout that doesn't mean that those bears are really thick in all those areas. You'll have good populations here and there, just like we do in North America with black bears. But that's primarily where they're found. That's why they're called the Asian black bear. Now, if you look at the appearance, and this will make it really easy to tell. The color, they're black with the shaggy mane. Now, that shaggy mane, it's not shaggy hair throughout the whole body. It's generally just around the chest, or the shoulders and at the base of the neck. You can see in the picture there to the left. They usually have this big white crescent that's usually in the shape of a moon, and that's why they're nicknamed moon bear. But here's one of the things that I found just studying this over the last couple of weeks. You can't get by this. Look at the ears. The ears on these Asiatic or Asian black bears or moon bears they so much remind me of Mickey Mouse. They're almost perfectly round, and oftentimes they're quite large. And so keep an eye on the ears whenever we show you pictures, and you'll see how those ears kind of stand out. Now, these are a little bit bigger than the spectacled bears that we just talked about. These, like I said, they're a really close cousin to our North American black bear. And so they're fairly easy. They're easy to guess what they're doing and how big they are. So 200 to 450 pounds, very similar to what we have for black bears. Once again, they're omnivorous. They're going to be eating the native vegetation, primarily the plant life as opposed to meats. Habitat, once again, like the black bear, they can live in all sorts of wetlands to high mountain areas. Southeast Asia, just like we have here in North America, the people tend to settle in the lower lands and they push the bears in different areas. Fortunately, because bears are so adaptable, they can live in any area. These types of bears generally do fairly well because they're not restricted to a certain type of habitat. Unfortunately, with these bears, now once again, when we're in North America, we have a really good system in which we do a lot of research on animals. In some of these southeastern countries, it may not be as extensive. There's still research in the animals. In fact, many of you know Carl Malcolm, who assisted me with a couple of webinars in the past. Carl did his doctoral degree studying the Asian black bear over in China. And so unfortunately, they don't have a really good grasp on the population. In certain areas they do, but for the entire population, they don't. And because of that, their status is listed as vulnerable. They do believe, because of the increasing human populations, that many of those bear populations in Southeast Asia are therefore decreasing. So they're listed as vulnerable. So that is the Asian black bear. The next one, this is the sun bear. Now, I always practice pronouncing this. Hylarctos malleolus. I had to think about that. Hylarctos malleolus. And the reason it's malleolus, it's Malaysian bear. That's the other nickname for it. So whenever you see this sun bear, it's also known as a Malaysian bear. Some people will call it, I haven't heard it called this, but this is through the research, sometimes they call them honey bears. But this is interesting. If you look south at the range, they're primarily found in Southeastern Asia again, but these are the bears that kind of spill onto those Pacific islands. So if you look at the map, again, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, but then you're getting into Malaysia and some of those really tropical islands. This helps me a ton understanding more about the sun bear. It's a good reason it's called the sun bear. If you look at the appearance, and this is the nerdiness in me, trying to remember which bear is which, I come up with little quirks that help me remember what is what. And so these bears, they're often black. They often have a chest blaze, so you're going to have that white marking. But this is what I noticed with this guy. They have that droopy look. I shouldn't call it like a pug, but the one in the picture I just showed has a lot of the wrinkles. Not all of them will have that wrinkles. But it literally, when I say the droopy look, their ears are all mushed down. And what helps me remember it, I think the sun bear, it's like the sun melted their face. It's bad to say, but that's how I remember it. Whenever I see that, and it's like, ooh, the sun got to that bear. So anyway, that's how I remember the sun bear. Pretty simple. Now, these are relatively small bears. Now, remember, they're, once again, in those tropical islands, Malaysia, Indonesia, that area. It is hot there, hot and sticky. So you don't want to be big 500-pound bear with a black coat. You can be a much smaller bear that can crawl into crevices and get out of the heat. So this is probably one of the smallest bears we have, generally 50 to 180 pounds. Diet, pretty easy, omnivorous. They're eating whatever they could find on those tropical islands. Now the habitat, like I said, you're hitting those islands. For the most part, most islands, they're right at sea level. And so besides being hot, it's often humid. So it's no wonder these bears look like they're melting there, because it's got to be a pretty tough life for them. Now, population, you have to understand where they're located. Third world country, Indonesia, Malaysia. Yeah, there's some cities, but for the most part, those rural areas are really rural, and there's not much going on there. So we don't know population-wise how they're doing. Once again, they're listed as vulnerable. They believe with the increasing human populations, it's really taking a toll on these bears. So that was the sun bear. We got 2 more to go. The next one, I say it's one of my favorite because I think it looks really cool. It's the sloth bear, Melursus ursinus. And it's really easy to recognize with that shaggy hair. But if you look at its range, once again, Southeast Asia, but this time, these are the bears that you find primarily in India. And so if you look at that range map, it bleeds over in a couple other countries, but for the most part, you have these isolated populations throughout India. And that's where you find the sloth bear. Now, appearance-wise, obviously they're black. The shaggy fur is the thing to notice, but it goes especially throughout the shoulders, but it goes all the way up to the top of the head. You're starting to get the shaggy ears. Now, you might have some of the shagginess in the Asian or Asiatic black bear around the shoulders, but this gets pretty much shaggy everywhere. It looks, oh, my dog's right here, but very shaggy hair. That is very indicative of that sloth bear. So they're usually pretty easy to identify. Now, once again, India, it's going to be hot, humid in there. Still relatively small size, a little bit bigger than that sun bear. But you're looking at bears that are only typically 100, 150 to 300 pounds at most. They're omnivorous, but the specialty with these guys is they love termites. They do have a very long tongue that can get into some of those termite mounds and extract those termites. And so these bears adapt to their environment. And so it's wonderful, the adaptations that animals take on that allow them to survive. And so although they're omnivorous, a good portion of their diet is actually insects. Now, the habitat, again, the forested areas in lower elevations, that's what these bears prefer. You don't really have them really high elevation in India. They tend to like the lower elevations. Population, India is fairly, is more developed than many of the countries over there. So they have a fairly good handle. Anywhere between 10,000 to 25,000 sloth bears running around in that area. But they're still listed as vulnerable. Now, you have to understand, in Southeast Asia, human populations are usually growing much quicker than they are in North America. And so they're listed as decreasing. And so last but not least, the fourth and final bear from Asia is this guy. It's the giant panda, Ailuropoda melanoleuca. And I had to practice that one too. But the giant panda, everyone is familiar, I shouldn't say everyone, but I'm sure almost everyone is familiar with what pandas look like. But the range, Southeast Asia, they're only found in China. And it's a very limited range. You can't see it really good. Maybe here, let me do this really quick. Whoops. Let me go back here. I didn't have a really good map, so I had to come up with this, but within that, you can see some dots going on there. That is the extent of their entire distribution worldwide. And so very limited geographically. And that's why we've got to be really careful with pandas, because they have such a limited distribution. Now, appearance, really? I'm hoping I don't have to explain, but I will, just for those that have never seen a panda before. And so obviously they have this very distinctive coloration. That white face with the black eyes, black ears, it's almost perfect how similar they are, but they're absolutely gorgeous. It's like a child designed them with the coloration. Pretty much all black and white. Some of the black can be brownish or even reddish in color, but the coloration or the patterning on pandas is usually very, very similar. Now size, once again, these are about a medium-sized bear. You're looking at about 150 to a 300-pound bear. Now what does it eat? It's bamboo-ivorous. Now, don't tell anyone I made up that word, but I just made up that word. There is no such word, in case you're wondering. There's bamboo-ivorous is not in any textbook. But the reason I wrote that out is that is 99% of their diet. They're eating bamboo. Now, depending on different times of the year, they'll have microbes in their stomach that helps them digest the more woody bamboo versus the leaves, and so their organisms in their gut changes. But for the most part, they're eating bamboo. This could be the very reason why they're restricted to such a small range. So these, as opposed to, for example, a brown bear or a black bear that can live in any habitat, pandas need to live in areas where bamboo is growing in large quantities because they have to, being a large animal, they have to eat lots of bamboo. So this really restricts to where they can be. Okay, habitat forested areas and high elevations in China, but that stipulation is there has to be an ample supply of bamboo growing in that area. Now population, you talk about imperiled. They're guessing between 500 to 1,000 animals in the world, in the wild. Some will put it up to even closer to 2,000, which is good. But this is really interesting. It's impressive. They're listed as vulnerable, but because all the protections that we have put on to help the giant panda in the wild, their populations are actually increasing. Very much like the black bears in North America. When we put our minds to it, we can do great things. And they've really helped the giant pandas in China. And so they're seeing their populations rebound from historically precipitous lows. So that's a really good sign. Okay, so that is all 8 bear species of the world. But this is where it gets fun. No, not yet. We're not having fun yet. Hold on, let me answer this question from Jeannie. At what point is a species survival plan implemented to help a species or a subspecies? Jeannie, that all depends on what country you're living in. In the first world countries, so you're looking at the United States, Canada, China, even India, they really have a good pulse on what's going on with the wildlife. And when they see wildlife numbers getting low, they'll implement survival plans. We also call them recovery plans. And so a lot depends on the country and how advanced they are. Now, I will tell you, in those third world countries where the people are still just learning how to survive, saving an endangered species is not high on their priority list. And so unfortunately it boils down to the advancement of the country. And so the good thing is with a lot of the countries, these first world countries, we have a pretty good pulse, and we can begin to enact these survival or recovery plans. And we've done some really good things. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of animals in need, but we've done a lot of good things to restore some of these animals that are falling a lot further than we want them to. And Shirley asked a question about why there's no bears in Africa. I don't know. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. And so oftentimes you see something where species go extinct and there's no good answers why they don't exist in a certain area anymore. I wish I could tell you the exact reason why we don't have the bears in Africa, but it's something that I just can't give you a good definitive answer for. So let me finish this last slide, and then we're going to go to a quiz again. So bear conservation, and this speaks exactly to what Kelly just asked about the recovery plans or the survival plans. When we're talking about bear conservation, look at this photo that I just put up there. This is a typical scene, say somewhere in North America. You have these cabins in the mountains. Look at those cabins. They're high end. Oftentimes a lot of these homes are second homes or summer homes. And so the people are well to do. They're not struggling to survive. they more or less live in the lap of luxury. They have beautiful homes. Their care for survival is really not that high. So when it comes to bear conservation, we really have to, we don't have to manage the bears. We have to manage the people. You hear me talking about this all the time. Kim Delosier talks about it all the time. It's more about people management. What do the people have to do in order to successfully or peacefully live with bears in this situation? So these people in North America are dealing with black bears, brown bears, but it's for the most part people management. You have to draw a line. Whenever I teach my class, I have to remind people that people are part of the equation. We are on this earth just like bears are on the earth, just like lions, just like insects, butterflies, birds. We are a species on this earth, and we need to learn to coexist. And so if you look in some of these areas where some of these animals might not be doing so well, they're not living in luxury homes. They're living in huts in very, very primitive situations, usually no electricity, no running water. They are doing whatever they can to survive as a human species. And so you have to understand cultures wherever you exist. So if you go to Indonesia or some of these exotic places where animals may be struggling, you can't suddenly go in there and say, hey, you need to do this to save this species. Those people might be depending on that species for their own survival. And so it's a delicate balance. Now, understand, I love wildlife. I will fight till the day I die fighting for wildlife. But humans are part of that wildlife equation. They're in that natural web. And so I do caution people whenever I bring the students, the SWAP students, the cultural side of things is a huge portion of our learning on how to manage wildlife, because you have to understand people and cultures in order to better manage wildlife, because it all boils down to them, because they usually have the greatest impact on the wildlife. Okay, before I get to the quiz, let me answer Trisha's question. Can you compare and contrast a little the moon bear versus the North American black bear? Behavior, hibernation, tree climbers. Okay, well, looks-wise, you saw the Mickey Mouse ears that usually, the Asian black bear or Asiatic black bear has those Mickey Mouse ears. They also have a very prominent chest blaze as compared to North American black bears. Now, North American black bears can have a chest blaze, but it's not usually as big. So looks-wise, that's one of the main differences. Behaviorally, they're very, very similar. Now, I will tell you that in North America, black bears, I get in a fight all the time, almost all black bears hibernate. Hibernation is not, it has nothing to do with snow, has nothing to do with cold. It has everything to do with lack of food. And in many parts of North America, during the wintertime, there's not a lot of lush vegetation for those bears. So there's lots of lack of food. And so most bears in North America will hibernate. Now, one of the main differences, now those Asiatic black bears in those more northern latitudes where they'll have more severe winters, they too hibernate. But a lot of those bears in the southern latitudes, whether or not it's the Asiatic black bear, sun bear, sloth bear, there's not a lack of food. It's a growing season all year long, and so they will skip the hibernation, or they don't go into hibernation. But those Asiatic black bears in the northern latitudes where the food kind of disappears for a while because of wintertime, those bears will go into hibernation. Let me go up and hit some of these questions. Okay, I hit the hibernation. Tree climbers, the Asiatic black bear, just like the North American black bear, is very adept at climbing. Their claws are designed for climbing trees. I will tell you one thing that's interesting is the spectacled bears in South America. They've been known to build kind of nests in trees to hang out for literally a couple of days. They'll gather some stuff up there and just kind of sit in the treetops for days on end, eating some of the vegetation around them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But most bears are very adept at climbers. The ones that don't climb are the brown bears. Polar bears tend not to climb because there's hardly any trees there, but brown bears don't climb, but most of those black bear species and these other tropical species are very adept at climbing trees. Donna, fantastic point about the Nature Conservancy. I've worked with them on multiple projects, and they are fantastic. And the fact that they understand the cultural implications. In fact, one of the projects that I was supposed to be working on, but the person I was working with kind of dropped off the radar, was developing a webinar for the people in South America to live with the Andean black bear and the cougar. But a lot of that, she was with the Peace Corps, but the Nature Conservancy, they have a wonderful blend. Fantastic organization to be a part of. By all means, look them up, and if you want to join along, join along. Yeah, Jeannie, the diet of an animal really dictates how big it gets. Look at the diet of humans. I'm sure if you're eating a salad every single day of your life, you're not going to be growing to huge proportions. All right, let me take one more question. There is no other question. All right, hold tight, buckle in, because now that I taught you about those bears of the world, we'll see how much better you do on the quiz. You don't have to type it in. By all means, type it in, and you'll want to type faster. But now that I taught you all this, let's see how well you do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a bear identification quiz. And so get your typing fingers ready. That one should be easy. I'll come back to that question in a second. Yes, brown bear, very easy to identify. That hump is very characteristic. What is that one? Kodiak, still a brown bear. Very, very good. All right, what about that one? That one's easy. Black bear. You guys are awesome. I tried tricking you on that one. That is the Kermode bear, or spirit bear, found on the islands just outside of Vancouver, Canada. What is that? Mary, believe it or not, that is still a black bear. Remember, black bears can come in all sorts of colors. They reddish, brown, blonde. Black bears are the most beautiful bears because of their wide range of color. Now on the East Coast, they're almost all black, but here out west, they come in lots of different colors. So that too is a black bear. Yes, Lori, no hump. And then that one's easy. This is what most people see. One of our wonderful wildlife photographers took that. Black bear. Okay, those are the North American ones. Whoops, sorry. Polar bear, you all know you don't have to type that one. All right, what's that? Sloth bear. Yeah, whenever you see that bear that looks really shaggy, kind of, I don't know if it reminds you of a sloth, but yeah, that shaggy looking bear is almost every time going to be a sloth bear. This bear with the melted face. Yes, it's been out in the sun. It's like whole face is sagging, especially the ears. You see the ears sagging. And so that's, whenever you see that, you just think, man, the sun just melted that bear. That one's too easy. I'm not even going to. All right. How about this guy? Yes, moon bear. This is that Asiatic bear, also known as a moon bear. And this has a much better photo of the chest blaze. In almost every situation, it is in the shape of a moon, a crescent moon on their chest. You can't see his ears too good, but if he turns face on, you'll see some pretty distinct Mickey Mouse ears. But that's that Asiatic or moon bear. What is that? Really simple, spectacled. All right, last but not least, what is that? Very good. Back to a black bear. Back to North America. Again, showing the variety of colors in black bears. This is what we call a glacial bear, which has that bluish, grayish tint to it. Absolutely gorgeous bears. I love black bears. Okay, now this is where we're going to separate the men from the boys, and let's see who the pros are, because I'm not going to show you the full body of the bear. So let's see what you can get with this. Moon bear. Yep, Mickey Mouse ears. I love those ears. Whenever you see that, that's the Asiatic black bear or moon bear. What's that? Sloth bear. That really shaggy fur that literally, now an Asiatic bear or an Asian bear will have shaggy fur around the shoulders, but it usually does not extend up into the ears like it does on the sloth bear. There's the melted head again. All right, what's that? Very good, brown bear. That's the distinctive hump that's on a brown bear or a grizzly bear. All right, what's that? I didn't mention this. I did talk about this in the Winter Wonderland webinar. But polar bears, they're uniquely designed to live on that ice flow. And so when they're hunting, if you get some clean ice, everyone knows ice is really slippery, so the bottom of their feet forms this tread. It's these black papillae, which is just specialized skin cells that forms, it's almost like a rubber matting, but that's that rubber matting on the hind foot of a polar bear. Yes, they will have long claws. You're not seeing them there, but if you pull back the fur, they're going to have decent claws. Nothing like a grizzly bear, but they definitely do have some pretty nasty claws. Trish, remember, polar bears can be, or pretty much are, the biggest species of bear in the world. So you're going to be looking 8 to 12 inches across on a really large bear. They have huge paws. You don't want to have an encounter with a polar bear. All right, what's that? Spectacled. I knew what you typed there, Jeannie. Don't worry about it. Yeah, whenever you see that raccoon mask, but reverse, instead of being a black mask, it's this yellow mask, you have that spectacled bear. And so it becomes really easy to remember these things, knowing these nice little tricks. And last but not least, that one's easy enough. You don't have to identify that. So with that, my friends, I believe I'm going to let you know that those are the bears of the world. Now, 8 different species. You could study more about there's I was thinking of adding all these neat little facts about each one of these species, but then I'd be talking for 2 hours and nobody would want that. But those are the wonderful ones. We have 3 in North America. Well, some of them are found throughout the Northern Hemisphere, but those 3 in North America and other places. Then you have that 1 in South America, that spectacled bear. Then you have those 4 species, which are those Asian varieties, from the sloth to the sun to the panda to the Asiatic black bear. So I'm sure 2 hours would be fine. People would be popping in and out, but my problem is I could fill that time up in no time at all. Before I end this and start answering whatever questions you have, I do want to go through, got to give credit where credit is due. I have to think it's difficult finding bear photos you could use. Bear Trust International is, I contacted them to let me use a bunch of their pictures, which was fantastic. Grabbed a couple of pictures from the International Association of Bear Research and Management, and then Bob Habershell and Rita Russell provided most of the North American photos. As you know, now we do have a couple of new folks. So any of the new folks on here, we do have a website called wildlifeforyou.com. That's where you could go sign up for any of the classes. You could see some of the things that are coming down the pipe on that little calendar at the bottom of the screen. But you could read about this whole Wildlife for You program. But the best thing to do that makes it really easy for us is follow us on Facebook. If you do have a Facebook, just look up Wildlife for You and like us. We do a lot of class announcements there. We answer questions. We have some fun trivia and neat little facts that we put up there. Trish Stevens, who is joining us tonight, does our Twitter page. She does a fantastic job with that. If you do go on Facebook, please provide comments, especially if this is the first time taking this class or if you're a new student altogether. We love getting feedback. Before I move on, it just reminded me, we were supposed to have someone join us tonight, Janice Haynes. She's one of the regulars. She signed up for the class and she had to attend some family business in Florida, which was unfortunate. But just want to let Janice know we're thinking about her and wishing her well done in Florida. I told her she'll have a recording waiting for her when she gets a chance. So hi Janice, hope you get a chance to watch this. And then last but not least, mark your calendars. I'll try to do this quick just to let you know what's coming down the pipe for these webinars. This Sunday, we're doing a brand new webinar. I'm looking forward to this because I'm going to be a student. We have Jenny Paul, Dr. Jenny Paul from Cleveland State Community College. She helped us with the SWAP students. Most people know what the SWAP program is. But Jenny Paul is an aquatic specialist. She studies fish and insects. Fantastic teacher. She's one of those really high energy, engaging people. She's going to be teaching us about this wonderful world of aquatic insects and things you find under the water when you're walking in a stream. I'm looking forward to that. The best thing about that, it's a free class. She wanted to invite everyone here. You just let us know if you want to attend. We'll send you that login information. Now, the one thing that I will add, she's trying to raise money for the National Park Foundation. So if you attend the class, we have a link that you could donate money that we'll donate to the National Park Foundation because of this furlough. Some of those organizations are really hurting, and Jenny wanted to raise money if she could. You don't have to. If you don't feel like donating, you could just join us anyway, but just let us know. That is this Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern. The next one I have is going to be about 2 weeks away, a little less than 2 weeks away, February 5th. It's going to be animal tracks. We're going to talk about identifying different tracks you find, whether or not it's in sand or snow, and understanding what animal you have before you that has crossed your path. And then we get into a couple of webinars from Kim Delosier. And many of you have already signed up through this ABR package with all the bear classes. It was today's class and then these two by Kim Delosier. His first class will be February 21st. It'll be about bear encounters. He is probably the world's leading foremost expert on bear encounters. That'll be 7 p.m. start on the 21st. And then he has one in March that will be talking about black bear management. How do we manage bears in North America? Again, that will be on Thursday at 7 p.m., but that's March 7th. So those are 4 classes coming up. Hope to see you all there. But with that, I'm going to say this is the end of today's webinar as far as the presentation goes. I will be here as long as you want, answering whatever questions you may have. So let me go back. I know there was a question before I started all those quizzes, so I'm gonna go back and try to find that question. Oh, I don't know if I could go back. Apparently I can't go back that far. Someone asked a question right before we did that last quiz, and apparently it's not letting me scroll all the way to that first question. Laura, I should have thought of a lightning round. That's what we should do. We should have a quiz one day where the winner of the quiz portion gets like a free webinars or something. Okay, Jeannie asked about how quickly bears grow within the first year. Do the others grow so quickly? I will tell you first and foremost, I'm not a leading expert on some of those Asian bears, so I don't know the details about it, but I can almost guarantee that they're going to have similar growth patterns as the North American bears. Reason being, they're born really small. Now, understand that those bears in Southeast Asia, there is no hibernation, so those bears are born They're probably staying in a den area until they get their feet under them, and then they're able to follow mom at a much earlier time, so they're not staying in that den for an extended period of time growing. But those bears really have to get on their feet quickly. When you live in an environment with lots of other animals that could eat you, and there's definitely some animals in tropical forests. In Southeast Asia, you're dealing with tigers and other things like that. You need to be able to defend yourself quickly. And so most of the time, these animals grow really quickly. It doesn't matter what animal you are. You could be a bear, you could be a deer. You've got to grow up fast. Now, understand that a lot of these animals, their lifespan is not as long as ours. What I found interesting is some of these Asian bears species, for example, sun bear, and I forget which other one, but there's another Asian bear species. They're long-lived. They're living in the wild 20, 25, sometimes even 30 years. But for the most part, you grow up fast if you're a wild animal. You cannot afford to be small and helpless too long. Thanks for reminding me, Trish. If anyone uses Twitter or knows people that use Twitter, we do have that Wildlife for You Twitter page. Kelly wrote a comment about a coworker telling her about a living specimens of a Himalayan bear that was believed to be extinct. Have I heard anything? I have not heard about that, but it wouldn't surprise me because you have to understand some of these areas in Southeast Asia can be very remote, whether or not it's a tropical island or even the inland Southeast Asia. You can be very, very remote. And so I do know that they've recently discovered some cat species. I think that was in South America. But it wouldn't surprise me if they discovered an animal that they thought was extinct, especially in some of these more remote locations. That would be fantastic. But unfortunately, I haven't heard or read anything about that yet, Kelly. I'll see if I can look it up. All right. Well, I am going to stop the recording and thank you all once again. You guys were absolutely fantastic, and I absolutely have a blast teaching you.